great to be with you.
Okay, go ahead.
I just had to click that button that said I've got it. So good afternoon, everyone. It's really nice to be with you. And I have a few slides to share, and I'll talk to the slides in just a moment. And then, you know, if you've got a burning question, you want to interrupt me as we go along, by all means do so. But I don't have a lot of slides. I just thought it would be better for us to have a conversation and to talk about the questions that you've got in your mind, and maybe the slides will bring those questions up for you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my slides here.
From
the beginning. Okay, so Robert introduced me. This is who I am, Joan Silcox-Smith. I'm currently manager for spiritual care at 6 hospitals in Grey and Bruce, 4 hospitals in South Bruce, Hanover and District Hospital, Chapman House Residential Hospice, and the palliative home care team. So, and a partridge in a pear tree. There's everything under the sun under my direction. So who am I? Why would you want to have any conversation with me, I suppose? I have been certified as a spiritual care practitioner since 1996 with CASC. I was the director of chaplaincy services, as we called it at the time, at Princess Margaret for a few years in Toronto. As Robert mentioned, I was the director for spiritual and religious care at North York General for 20 years. The last few years of that, I also was asked to be the director of volunteer services. So if you're looking to become a manager, you might find that you also have the opportunity to be a manager of other departments. Volunteer services is often one of those that you might find that you would be asked to manage. I know of a few others that people have gotten involved with. And currently I'm a manager here in Owen Sound. When I'm not at work and I only work part-time, it's the first time in my life I've ever worked part-time, but I make handmade cards, I'm a cyclist, I'm a reader, I'm a nana, and according to my picture, I'm a beach walker. And when the weather's not too crazy, I also get out in my kayak too. So today my presentation is going to be around the 5 things that I think would be helpful to you to either know or work on if you're going to be interested in doing any kind of management for spiritual care, or maybe to support your manager in spiritual care. So these are the 5 things that I'm going to talk about today. So let's deal with the real world. So I made a list of all the things I do in a typical day or in a typical year as the manager. So there's always a gazillion emails. On a Tuesday morning when I come in, I always set aside an hour to deal with emails, and I sometimes don't have enough time. If I'm away on vacation, sometimes it'll take me more than a day to get through all the emails. And of course, like today, we have Zoom meetings too. And the biggest advice I can give you on that is to be as prompt and reliable as you can. So always make sure you've got a bounce back message and people know when they're going to be able to hear from you. Excuse me. Always as the manager, you're going to get involved with hospital committees. Currently, I sit on the organ and tissue donation committee, the MAID resource team, the clinical leadership team, also the management team for the other organizations that I supervise, ethics, the professional practice council, weekly town halls. There always is an endless number of meetings. Early on in my time as a director or manager, I decided that I needed to really come to grips with meetings. And so I decided that administration has the word ministry in the middle of it, and I do see my meeting work as part of my ministry. There's also the regional meetings. So I have the Grey Bruce Hospice Palliative Care Collaborative, I sit as an executive member of the CASC Southwest Ontario Regional Group. So there's all those different regional meetings that you would have for wherever you're living and working. I plan educational opportunities for my staff and for the community. So just a few examples of that would be in services. You might already be doing those as part of your regular spiritual care work. I do volunteer training at least yearly. Sometimes we do it twice a year. And I participate in the didactics for our CPE group here. So that's just a couple of examples of education. One of the important things that takes a while when you first come into a new area is building those relationships with the community faith leaders. So because I was in Toronto for so long, I had a lot of those relationships well developed. I can still call on those because I knew them for so many years. But here in the Grey Bruce area, those are still, after 4 years, relationships that I'm working on. So those are ones to really spend time with. Organizing, how many things do we have to organize? One of the ones is on call. So we have to schedule, we have to offer ongoing support for them. I meet quarterly with them. You may have other groups like them that you would need to organize. I have monthly budget reviews, and in my case, I have a hospital budget that I have to be responsible for. And because the spiritual care providers under me are all on contract with the Grey Bruce Spiritual Care Council, I have council budgets to deal with as well. Also, in a typical day or year, I have to write grant requests. Because the Spiritual Care Council is a registered charitable organization, they depend on donations and grants and all sorts of funding. I can write up to 40 or 50 grants a year. So you need to either learn how to write grants or just get some people who've done it before who can advise you. That can be really important. I'm responsible for the weekly time cards for my staff, for people getting paid. I participate in an organizational orientation for new staff. Something that's been extremely, excuse me, important in the last couple of years, of course, is pandemic planning. When I was at North York, I was part of the family, what did they call it? It was FISC, Family Information Center, where if there was an emergency and families need to find their loved ones, they would come in. Spiritual care was very involved with that. As the manager, you're involved in policy writing and reviewing policies on a regular basis. Department brochures, usually because we're a small department, I'm responsible for that. I work with my secretary. I'm lucky to have one, not everybody does. We have annual memorial services. Some places have them more often, but that's part of the work. Promotion, making sure people know who we are and what we do. That's a big piece of being the manager. So, you know, Spiritual and Religious Care Awareness Week is coming up in October. We currently have created a postcard information card that we put in all the packages for surgical patients coming in for pre-screening. And whenever I get the opportunity to speak around the organization or even in the community, I do that too. Like most places, volunteer training is a requirement for spiritual care volunteers. So you have to develop that training and then recruit for the department. We haven't had any volunteers in since COVID. Just recently, we started having our on-call chaplains back in, excuse me, and they fall under that category. I'll talk about HR in a little bit, but hiring and firing and doing yearly contract renewals is part of what I am responsible for. I'm currently recruiting for one of our positions and annual performance reviews. If you've been on the receiving end of those, you can know sometimes you have people who do them very well and other people who don't do them well at all. If you're in a management position, you want to be one of those people who do it very well. It's always important to keep up your credentials. So whatever continuing education or memberships that you need to do, you have to be the role model for the department. Staff support is extremely important. So I currently have monthly supervision meetings with all my staff. I have about 12 of them. It fluctuates. I do a yearly retreat. We're actually doing ours in October this year. Typically, I've done it in June, but COVID changed that for me over the last couple of years. And I do follow up emails and phone calls if I know particular staff are struggling or have contacted me about a debriefing that they needed because of a tender or sensitive situation. So what are the tools that you need to be a good manager? So the first thing you really need to know is what is your leadership style? And if you don't know your leadership style, then you need to take some leadership training and discover what your style is. My current style is I'm a leader. I'm not necessarily everyone's best friend, although I consider myself to be friendly. I like to be considered more of a collaborator than a micromanager. I'm not following up to make sure that my staff have done every little thing that needs to be done. They don't need to run everything past me before it can be done. I trust them to do their work. I do have regular check-ins with my staff. I have an open door policy. So right now, while I'm with you, my door is closed. But if my door is open, both my staff and the wider hospital community know they can come in. Mm-hmm. I keep my boundaries. I'm very clear about my boundaries. That's both personal boundaries, professional boundaries, even time boundaries. Because most jobs have professional creep and you can end up putting in a lot more extra time than what you're contracted for. I always keep my promises as best I can. And of course, with our work, everything that we do, keeping confidence is really important. So because you're going to get the slides, you've got these couple of resources that I have used and recommend. They're getting to be a little bit older now, but then I've been in this business for a while now too. But the Spirit-Led Leader from the Alban Institute is a good resource, as well as the Spiritual Leader's Guide to Self-Care, also from the Alban Institute. More tools. Good listening skills are by far the best tool that all of us in spiritual care use. But as a manager, you have to be listening not only with your ears, but also with your heart and to the undercurrent of what's going on. So different kinds of training that will help you with that. Obviously, our CPE certification or PCE certification will help with that. Those of us in Ontario will consider having CRPO registration. These are your credentials that you're going to have to keep up. These will give you credence and with the wider organization. And I know that at North York, it was really important that I get my CRPO registration, because in the Allied Health took me more seriously when I was meeting with them. Another training that I took years ago that I have found invaluable to me over the years is spiritual director companionship training. So that's something that you might consider. Different organizations have offered leadership training, and as a manager, sometimes they're required, sometimes they're offered. But if you make it known that you're interested in management positions with either your manager or the VP that your manager reports to, you might be able to get yourself invited to some of these internal trainings. So for example, at Princess Margaret, I took the BMO leadership training. At North York General, I took the Schulich business leadership training. Here at Grey Bruce Health Services, the Crucial Conversations and the Influencer course are required for all new managers, and those are great courses. And even if you can just get your hands on the books for those are really helpful. Understanding stigma, the Sanyas Indigenous cultural safety training has been a really important one for us up here, because we have two large reservations close to our healthcare facilities. Contingency planning. Another one that we had just recently was the Working Mind Manager Program. That's a wonderful one to look up. So anytime you get the opportunity to take a leadership course, I would highly recommend you take it. These days, there's lots of webinars online and a lot of them are free. But it's really important for you to be self-reflective and know who you are and what your style is. And it's also important for you to know your staff and what their skills are and what their experience is so that you can let them really shine as well. But be organized and then create your own system for being so. So as a manager, you need to have some HR skills. And these, I think I just learned them by gosh and by golly as I went along. But you really have to know how to hire the right people and learn how to do that. So you either have to take some sort of HR program or you need to make friends with your HR partner in the HR department. You really have to know when it's time to cut bait and move on and how to do that well. So if you have a staff person who's not performing, you've got ongoing issues, you need to know who to talk to about that and how to deal with it. You can get yourself into some legal problems if you don't do that right. So you do have to involve the right people at the hiring, those transitional moments, the hiring moment, the firing moment, the laying off process. Over the years, the laying off process is the hardest one for me because you're often laying off high performing people who you've become friendly with. And that was very difficult for me. You need to do yearly performance reviews. People need to know that they're doing well and on the right track. And if you have standards for benchmarking, that will help you to communicate to them. If they're not doing well, don't wait for an annual performance appraisal. They need to be told that so that they have the opportunity to improve. If you have any staff who are unionized, you need to learn what the union rules are. You want to avoid any opportunity for grievances, so you need to be very careful on that end of it. And so an old resource that I used was how to conduct win-win performance appraisals. I used that a lot at the beginning when I first started out. That was helpful to me. Another important tool is around finance, and this is not my strong suit. It's something I've had to learn over the years, so don't be afraid to ask for help and to learn from the experts. Our finance people are the experts, and so they will teach us. They're not going to make you feel stupid or that you should know this stuff already. Every hospital has their own software. Every time I've moved, I've had to learn a new financial software. Currently, I'm using one here called Questica. I've never heard of it before. But do make friends with your financial analyst and they will help you with your budgeting. You need to have a yearly plan and you need to always spend all your money without going over budget. Because if you go over budget, then you've got a variance explanation to put in. But if you don't use all your money, then the next time budget conversations come around, they'll say you don't need it and they'll cut your budget. So I have my budget meeting for the 22-23 year next week. So you always have to be thinking quite a ways ahead with budgeting. Number 3 on my list of 5 things is around communication. And for me, this is the most important point. You need to communicate really well and clearly and often with not only your staff, but with others in the organization. Information for me is power. And so you don't ever want to withhold that. You want to share everything you can. As a manager or a director, you will have information that's confidential from time to time, but share everything that you're allowed to share so that people don't get surprises. And especially around educational opportunities. You don't know what someone else wants to learn. So I've got somebody here who's interested in prison ministry, and we don't even have a prison nearby. But whenever I get an email that includes that, I make sure that they know about it. Because you never know what's going to happen down the road. And of course, in terms of communication, how you say things and when you say things can be crucial. So we all know that from our work. Now, the fourth thing is also really important, is around team building. So depending on where you're working, you might be a team of one. You might be lucky enough to have a secretary. You might be lucky enough to have other team members. Currently, I have a very large team. I have a part-time secretary. I've got 2 spiritual care providers here at the Joan Sound Hospital because it's the largest one. And then I have 1 at all the other places. And they're all very small contracts. Their contracts are in terms of number of hours per month, not per day or per week. Their contracts are so small, it's per month. But it's important, especially when you're working independently, that you feel like you're part of something bigger. So I do meet regularly, but I trust people, and so I don't smother them. I let them do their work, and I really encourage creativity. I want them to think out of the box. Maybe they're going to come up with a different way of doing something that I've not done before. It's not my way or the highway. It's let's do this the best way that we can with the resources we've got. From an HR kind of perspective, you're never going to criticize somebody in public or at a meeting. So you want to take them aside to have those conversations. And I wouldn't do it by email either. I would do that in person. So you want to develop a strategy for your team dynamics. So for example, I mentioned earlier that we do a yearly retreat. This year, our theme is the Tree of Life, and we have someone coming for the morning to do mindfulness meditation training, because not all our staff have done that before. And he's going to focus on the roots, the branches, and the fruit. And then I'll do something in the afternoon. So find something that is nourishing for them. Make sure if you've got a team, take turns doing the leading for the staff meetings. Help others to grow in their leadership skills by asking them or inviting them to do that. So at our monthly supervision meetings, I always have different people take leadership. You might try doing the Myers-Briggs or something else similar to that to get to know each other at the beginning if you're not familiar with each other. And plan something fun. So our retreat is usually at Sauble Beach. We have a Presbyterian facility there right on the beach here on Feathers. They donate the space for us. The last few years we've had it in June, so that part of the day is we go and hang out at the beach and go for a swim. This year we're going in October. I think it's going to be a little chilly for swimming, but maybe as part of the day we'll go for a walk on the beach and see what we can see. Try and recognize people at least once a year. So because I do card making now, I always make sure I do a card recognizing people's work and contributions at Christmas time. I try and recognize their work anniversaries, especially if it's 5, 10, 15 years, if it's really a significant time marker, and even birthdays, just little times of the year that it's not necessarily professionally based, it's just you remembering your team. And the last thing that I'll raise, and then when I'm done this slide, we can come back to questions and just have a conversation, is what's worked and what hasn't worked for me over the years. Mentorship with another leader has been extremely helpful to me. So either your own leader or one that you really respect. I've been very fortunate. I had a VP at North York who saw in me something. I was already the director for spiritual care when she became my VP, but she really groomed me. She gave me lots of leadership opportunities. And then it was her who asked me to lead the volunteer services department. And that was a department of 4 or 5 other staff with 1,000 volunteers. And so it was a huge responsibility. So work with others that you respect. Follow your own intuition. not doing that was one of my biggest mistakes. There was a time when I was doing a hiring, I wasn't sure about this person. We didn't have a lot of options at the time. And I didn't speak. I didn't say, I'm not sure. And it turns out it wasn't a good match. It wasn't a good fit. And in trying to deal with the aftermath of making a hiring mistake, someone else said, yeah, I was in on that interview too, and I wasn't comfortable with that person either, but I didn't have any real way of articulating that. And if both of us had been less afraid to speak and to follow our intuition, we might not have made that mistake at that time. So follow your intuition. Always ask for advice and seek counsel when you're not sure. Don't fake it, because people can tell. So just be honest and upfront and just say, I've never done this before. Can you help me with this? As I mentioned, let your leader or your VP know that you're interested in management opportunities, because then they'll keep you in mind. And that might just be the opening that you're looking for. But you need to be an expert in your field. You need to always seek more, read lots, make sure you're certified with CAS, get your CRPO registration, any other training that you can. It's important to be an expert. If you're going to be the leader of the team, you have to also be an expert. So make sure, this is a funny thing to add in here, but make sure you attend all the meetings where you'll have an opportunity to showcase spiritual care and influence the course of the organization. For Princess Margaret and Northrop General, I was a director. So I was at all the director meetings at that level. And I had the opportunity to speak, and I was able to influence the course of the organization. Here at Grey Bruce Health Services and the other organizations that I supervise, I'm at the management level. And in some ways that's great, because I don't have the extra stress and responsibility that comes with being a director, but I have less opportunity to have influence. So the higher up in the organization you can position yourself, the more influence you will have, and the benefit to spiritual care will increase. If you have the chance to chair a hospital committee, do that. So I have someone working with me right now, and she's got a lot of experience in ethics. And when the opportunity to chair the ethics committee came up, instead of taking that chair on myself, which I could have easily done, I offered to have her do it, and she is happily doing that. And it's good exposure for her, for the organization, and for the department. So when you're starting out, if you get the opportunity to manage or direct, settle in, get to know the role as best you can, however it's defined in your organization, evaluate the needs as you go along, and then you can plan your legacy. So my plan in this role, in this environment, is to raise the bar for the credentials for all my spiritual care providers. Some of my providers don't have CPE training. Some of them have a little bit of training. Some of them have more training but aren't certified yet. So my legacy here, I hope when I go, is that I've raised the bar. So we're half an hour into our time together. I'm going to stop talking now. I'm ask for questions and conversation, and then I'm going to stop sharing my slides. So if you want to just unmute, ask questions, anything that needs clarifying. People who've had the opportunity or not sure about wanting the opportunity.
Thank you for exquisite presentation. Wow. Fewer people doing more. Unbelievable how much territory you cover.
I work 3 days a week.
Can't get over that.
Mm-hmm.
In the north, I don't know what's happened to CASC, and I don't know what the role of CPE any longer is in job descriptions. They request one CPE unit and then don't require it. how do we raise the bar? How do we get things back out in the entire spectrum? It seems to exist in the cities or some places now.
Mhm.
Chaplains have disappeared, the roles, the financing, all of it. We're in another era of loss of jobs. I'm just resuming as a casual, and for livelihood, I've been doing it in the community, and it's a spiritual care enterprise in community. You can't do it focused on grief. You can't support yourself. So where do we go? Where does CASC in all of that across Canada now as the lead?
I'm going to answer two questions that I heard. One was around raising the bar, and the other one is around the financing. Yes, if you are applying for a spiritual care position in a larger city, Toronto, Hamilton, London, Kingston, wherever, the credentials are going to be required of you. And when I was in Toronto, if I was hiring somebody, I'm always looking for someone who's a certified practitioner first, or someone who's ready to be certified. I'm not going to hire somebody who's got no CPE or 1 or 2 units of CPE. Those are the credentials. In Northrop General, it was also a requirement that you needed to have CRPO or be ready to be registered with CRPO. And extra things are always good for your resume. Here in the North, when I've got contracts that are as small as 20 hours a month, finding that balance between asking for someone to be a certified practitioner and then only offering them 20 hours in a month of employment, well, that's a pretty big ask. So I have a position that's open in Meaford right now. It's 18 hours a month. 2 hours of that each month is with supervision with me and the rest of the group. And so 16 hours a month is for patient care. Now it's a small hospital. It's got about 12 or 15 beds. And so there's not that much for them to do. I always ask for the top credentials. And then I see who's most qualified when the applications come in. So currently I have 2 applications, and we'll interview for that position next week, and we will hire the person who's most qualified. Most of the people I have, so to answer the second question about the finances, can you make a living on 20 hours a month? No, you probably can't. So a number of my spiritual care providers have other jobs. So they're a clergy person in the community who's not working full time, or their congregation has allowed them to do this extra piece because they're committed to offering good spiritual care at the hospital, and their church is committed to that social outreach. So they combine things. I have a couple of people who, who's put together 2 of these positions to make enough hours for them to live on. Another person has got, because of different changes in my staffing, has got, I'm looking at my map here, has got 3 hospitals and is doing palliative home outreach work. So people find different ways of putting together their work, but raising the bar is my goal. I want, because the people in rural Ontario, rural Canada, deserve just as good spiritual care as the people who live in the cities. And so I want to make sure I hire the most qualified people every time I can.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Welcome. Why would any of you be interested in managing? I'd be interested to know why you would want to do this.
For me, it would be to establish to bring the bar up. It has gone way down, up where I am. It is absolutely mind-bending. And people who are doing chaplaincy lack credentials, period. And they put together job descriptions. It is so sad. And yet we'll hire people who don't even have those. I cannot understand, and I don't know where to go. Who can come up and help us begin to make it happen in institutions? OMC is no longer exists.
No.
Who is doing that? Who is pushing to create chaplaincy, spiritual care across the institutions? Who do we turn to? Who does it?
Well, I think we are CASC, and so we need to do that. So when you have the opportunity to influence, you always need to take it. So Collingwood Hospital had an opening about a year ago, and luckily they contacted me and said, how do I post this position? So I told them exactly who they should be looking for, and help them with their qualifications that they should be looking for. And they actually hired a really good person, and she's been in place there for a year, and she's now certified, and she's actually doing a provisional supervision training. So influence is really important. I inherited a number of people who have no credentials other than they're a pastor in the community, and I'm not dissing people in the community. My spouse is a pastor in the community, but he himself would say, I don't have the qualifications that you have to do what you're doing. I wouldn't want to do what you're doing. So if we have people who are already in those positions, then it's our responsibility, I think, to help get them trained. So I have supervision meeting with my staff every month. When I first started, it was more of a chitty chat, how are you doing kind of conversation. Now I have inserted an educational piece into every meeting when we meet. I send them an article to read, or I get them to watch a video, or there's a webinar, and then we all talk about it. So I insert that educational component into every meeting that we have.
So if we ask a hospital to review and look at, or try to find a way to get them to be open to and listen without offending, or how do we start? Do we ask them to go to CASC, go to you? Who's doing it now? Where do we go? I don't, if there's other questions, start with theirs. If there's anybody else, I don't want to go too far with that.
I don't have a clear answer on that one.
Okay.
I'm still got my question out here. Why are any of you interested? So Jeff, I hear why you're interested, and I can appreciate that because I have some of that here.
You know, one of the new competencies we have in CASC is leadership. And I think it's a topic we all need to focus on. And, you know, it's part of the motivation to have this conversation today. How can we, each of us, be leaders in the roles that we're currently in? And how do we enhance our credentials, our competency, our conversations about, you know, professional care, all of these things? How do we advance our careers? What opportunities present themselves to us, and how do we achieve more? I mean, these are the questions that I have. I've been a little frustrated in my career that I haven't had more success, you know, leveling up, let's say. And so my question to you would be, you know, how did you get your first job as a manager or director? Or how did you advance from a manager to a director? What's it like to be a director? What do you talk about at director meetings? I mean, these are all the things I'm curious about from my level, and I could use that kind of information to continue to develop my career.
Well, I didn't follow the proper path, you might say, to get my first director position. I hadn't even been hired as a chaplain yet. I had finished all my training. I was ready to be certified. I applied for an ICU job at Toronto Wellesley Hospital. And my, one second, sorry. My potential boss said to me, you know, you need to decide if you're ready to leave your church. I had a full-time pastoral care position in a church at the time. And you need to decide if you're ready to leave your church, because I want to bring you to the final interview. And I'd only been at that church 2 years, and I decided it wasn't fair to them, even though this was my goal, was to get a hospital position. So I declined the last interview with great regrets. About a year later, the director's position at Princess Margaret came up, and I didn't apply for it, but she called me and she said, I'm on the interview team for Princess Margaret. I want you to apply if you're ready. I said, I haven't even worked as a paid chaplain yet. She said, for us right now, what's most important is that we have the right person. You can learn the things that you need to learn to be the director, and I will help you, because she was my colleague at Toronto West Wellesley. And so I applied and I got the position, and was within 1 month of my arrival that they had accreditation. And in those days, every department had to produce their own accreditation binder. So like my learning curve was straight up. But sometimes it's being the right person and showing that you have a willingness and ability to learn that will get you into those positions. And sometimes it's just luck. I think in my case, it was just luck. I forget the second part of your question, Robert, but I think it was about what kinds of things do they talk at director meetings? It's a lot of stuff that you might say has nothing to do with spiritual care. And yet I would argue everything has to do with spiritual care. So whether they're talking about budgets or facility planning or the new upcoming strategy or what the board of directors has determined is coming down the pike. But the one thing about being at the directors meetings is you know everything that's going on. So I didn't start as a manager and move up to a director. I just started right in as a director. Princess Margaret at that time, when I first started, the director for spiritual care met regularly with the CEO. He valued spiritual care, and so I met with him. Now then they changed CEOs, and we had another wonderful CEO. And of course, we moved hospitals to the location they're in now, all that kind of good stuff. But they really valued spiritual care. And at Northern General, it was a director's position because they felt that spiritual care needed to be at that level of the organization, and I reported to a VP. Now, the time I was there, I had 13 different VPs, but it was always at the VP level. Here, it's just a little different of an organization, and it's easier for me to manage being at the manager's level. But the director level conversations around the table are often confidential. You'll know ahead of time when a big shakeup is happening in terms of cuts that are coming to the hospital. At Princess Margaret, I remember we laid off 40 nurses on one day. I knew about that ahead of time. I could be prepared for that, and I had things ready to set up to support staff. So those kinds of things can be really helpful.
If I could just go back to what you said, it was really interesting talking about the importance of certifications and credentials in order to raise the bar. And you mentioned in your story, you know, that there's something about you that others recognize as being the right person, but you said that you weren't really ready on paper, let's say. I mean, what do you think they saw in you? What qualities do you think you have that would have gotten you the job at that time, and that I guess have sustained you in your role since then, without necessarily being prepared ahead of time?
Well, you have to remember 25, 30 years ago, you didn't need all the credentials that I think are important for us to have now. So I was ready to be certified, so that was in my favor. But I think as me as an individual, I'm a people person. You don't have to be an extrovert, but you do have to be a people person. You have to be someone who can develop relationships, be a good listener in the sense that other directors, other managers can learn to trust you, confide in you. I don't know how many times I've had people come in and sit down in my office for support. And I think you have to be a good communicator. So if you can project that during an interview, and be honest about what you don't know. I've always been honest that finances are not my forte, but that I always make friends with my financial analyst. The hospital's okay with that because they trust their financial analyst, so they will give me good advice. Yeah, be a people person, be good at developing relationships, being open is really important.
Thank you. That's helpful. I also like what you said about taking every opportunity, like attending all meetings possible or rounds as a way to highlight and showcase what spiritual care is. There's always questions about what it is and what we do. So thank you for the conversation.
Even when we don't speak, we're making a statement. So even if there's a meeting that I'm not sure I'm going to be able to make much of a contribution to. So right now as a manager, I'm invited to the capital budgeting table conversations. I don't even have a capital request on the budget table this year, but I will go to those meetings because by being present, I'm making a statement and I'm making people remember that I'm part of the organization.
Thank you for your presentation. I found it very insightful. I work at the Ottawa Hospital, and it's interesting. My previous manager really raised the bar as well. She has us all certified, and with CASC and as well with RP, except one staff member who's a new hire. And interestingly, though, what I found is that to be an expert in your own field, right? Whereas our manager manages almost 150 people, and she's currently a social worker and is not an RP. She's an registered social worker, right? So it's just, and then there's a middle management between her. So it's just an interesting type of leadership, I guess. But and then it's a smaller team, but a lot of the things that you mentioned, such as the pamphlet and different things like leading the retreat, and it's actually part of our responsibility to do it because perhaps our manager is not available. Right. So it's just, I just made that comment.
It's a helpful comment. Thank you. Because every organization sets up differently. And a lot of hospital systems struggle to know where to put spiritual care. Sometimes I've been part of the allied health group. Sometimes, one time I was with the hospitality group. That caused quite a consternation, and the multi-faith partners really got uptight about that one. You know, they're not always sure where to put us. And we're foreigners in a foreign land, right? We don't speak medicalese. We have to learn the language of the environment where we live. And they do not in turn learn to speak spiritual care language. And we have to find a way to convert or translate what we're trying to communicate into language that they can understand. I had colleagues at one point, their goal was to fly under the radar. They were afraid if anybody noticed them, then their positions would get cut because then they might come into question. And if they could just fly under the radar, they could just keep doing what they do and have an impact and not worry about getting cut. And I completely disagree. I say, make yourself known, get out there, make sure as many people as possible know who you are and the impact that you have on people. Because that's what's going to secure your position. It's not flying under the radar. Because sooner or later, the bean counters are going to find you. So make sure when they're counting the beans that they want to know that those are important beans. just checking the chat box here. Graham is saying that it's personal leadership. It's always personal leadership because we always, as we learn from CASC, it's who we are and our own history and how we reflect on who we are is what we bring to whatever it is that we do in our work. I'd still like to know why any of you would be interested in taking my job. Oh, Weavings. I remember Weavings. Yeah, that was a good periodical. Mm-hmm.
I like what you said about, key feature. It shapes the way you approach the position is to leave a legacy and to raise the bar, or however else you might shape the department or its impact in the community. I like that. I can see why people would be attracted to a leadership position for that, to utilize their credentials, their insights, vision, I suppose, for shaping spiritual care in a community. Kind of like, I guess, what Jeff was talking about early on, about maybe there's a lack of that in some areas of our province or region.
Jeff, you're muted.
Lucky you. There was a time when groups like CASC and others in the US were promoting spiritual care and sent papers out, like the white paper, and then BC had a paper, and others, Saskatchewan had one, or Manitoba, and to promote the role of spirituality and spiritual care. Words that are not even always used up here consistently yet. Religious care is still dominating. But to get the conversations going, to be the guru, the number one influence in spiritual care across Canada. But I don't see that now, and I've seen initiatives over time, and they come and go. And training people for jobs that don't exist is always complicated. We don't have full-time positions. We don't have many positions, and I've watched hospitals in the North completely eliminate them. And I've seen the dumbing down of the standards, and it's very frustrating. It's been very sad and very challenging. So that's where I'm coming from. So that's why, if I wanted to be a manager, now I'm happy doing casual to support my livelihood. I'm old enough now, seasoned enough, but now I just want to do direct care. I've given up on trying to change the systems, but I see wonderful managers, social workers, and others doing their best to do this kind of work. You don't have to be trained in it to be a good supporter of those who can do it and try to build relationships. I do see that happening, but it's very broken up, dumbed down, with no consistent anything driving it.
I think that's been an ongoing frustration for CASC National. I mean, look at Saskatchewan. They fired all of their spiritual care providers. The only ones that are left in the whole province are ones that are religiously supported financially. And so Manitoba had a problem at one point in time, and I think the regional organization was able to go to bat for them. There was a period of time a few years ago when a whole health region in BC let go all of their spiritual care providers, and there was a big uproar, and they ended up hiring back most of them, which was kind of amazing. It was a story that we could be really proud of. I say somebody like you, Jeff, should get yourself on the regional CASC communications committee and help them develop some materials that could be sent out to hospitals to help underscore the importance of spiritual care and the importance of credentialing and the importance of having good leadership. Because yes, sympathetic social workers or other allied health can be good and supportive leaders for us. I think it's always better if we can do it ourselves. We have the language to speak for ourselves.
We also have to have money and foundations. And unfortunately, finances is a weakness of lots of people in chaplaincy because we're more involved in emotions and caring. It's hard for us to be focused on that reality, and that undermines, but understandably, that's the way it is. But I did not have enough money to even pay for registration for CASC in the past 5 years. So I'm going to be able to soon, and I hope to rejoin. So I'm exploring to see where it's at. So I haven't been in the circles for 6 years. Today's one of the first days, but this is the kind of thing that inspires me, that the support that this kind of professional opportunity brings. It's tricky. It's tricky. So yeah, I hear you. Thank you. But to volunteer anything, you have to have a financial foundation. To do any kind of volunteering, be it a board, be it in the community, et cetera, you have to have your own financial house in order somehow, somewhere, or a partner who does that so you can. So.
Well, welcome back, and I hope that things work out for you so that you can
Thank you.
participate more fully.
Because I had losses too. And I mean, I lost my spouse, I lost my parents, I lost my best friends. I had to move from my house. I'm in an apartment, but I'm surviving and I'm growing and I'm back in the world. And I'm grateful to be reconnected, but I'm 67 and I've just had to go back to work, but I've been working nonstop, trying to do it in the community. I've been working with grief exclusively, incredible. I'm building teams, grief recovery method. I'm using that in particular, among other tools. It's wonderful. The needs are endless, but you can't charge money easily for those things.
Oh, every blessing.
And I'm getting people trained, but I'm not making money. So now I've secured a job. I've tried 4 places to take care of myself simultaneous. Now I maybe can give some away and I'll be able to afford to come back to CASC.
Good one. Good one. Thank
you guys. Thank you.
Okay, we're almost at the top of the hour. Any last minute thoughts or questions for Joan before we close at 1 o'clock?
Can we clone you?
I don't think my family would tell you, you probably don't want to do that.
Thank you. Thank you for your leadership and
You're
experience. Awesome.
Yes, thank you very much, Joan, for your talk today. It's lovely to connect with you, and I really appreciate this conversation. I know others do as well. As I mentioned, a recording link to this talk, I can circulate that, and also the slides. And next week we'll have Sean Lucas as our guest speaker from CAMH, and the following week we'll have Mark Doucette. So looking forward.
Good guys.
Yeah, looking forward to continuing the conversation. And again, many thanks to you, Joan, and wish you well, and see everybody next time.
And thank you, Mr. Mundell. You're obviously the leader here, and everyone in their respective places, I bet, are doing wonderful work. I'm sure it's an awesome group, every one of you.
Jeff, just as you might know, tomorrow is our regional AGM, annual general meeting. Encourage you to tune into that.
No, I didn't know.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll try to check it out. I can't. I have a grief group at that time, and also a group of us marching with Take Back the Night for sexual assault victims in North Bay, Ontario.
Okay. Well, we can make sure that you receive the information and continue connecting with you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.